Howdy guys, we're going to get started on the video on how law enforcement should conduct a proper field interview, and I just want to start off by putting a plug-in for Rise of the Oathbreakers. Here it's not a bad book. Here the author's a pretty good guy too. So, there we go. Okay, this is going to cover field interviews strictly as it relates to the typical interaction between an officer and an activist. What you or we see all the time is somebody complains, the cops show up, interview the complainant or the reporting party, believe everything they say, and then go jam up the activist based on which is basically, it's not really hearsay in the legal sense, but it's completely unsubstantiated. So this is what worked for me, and this is something that acts as a template that other law enforcement officers and agencies can use, because what they're doing now is absolutely a disgrace. So let's get started. How to conduct proper field interviews. It all starts with the reporting party, right? The Karen or Darren who calls because they don't like what the activist is doing. So they call law enforcement to act as their enforcement arm to get the activists to stop doing what they're doing. But the problem is they don't report a crime per se. What they do is they report something and then they lie, they embellish. And that's where the real danger comes in. You have to understand the psychology behind what's going on with the reporting party. They don't like what the activist is doing, but at the same time they realize if they're going to call law enforcement, they have to kind of up the ante. They have to make it look like that there's something more serious that's here or present, because they don't want to look like a fool or look stupid in front of the cops. They're going to commit all these resources because they called, so they have to make it look like there's something more than is actually there. That's the motivation why they lie. So the reporting party calls law enforcement dispatch and they lie. So the lie is, once law enforcement dispatch has it, I just want to make a quick comment. Law enforcement dispatch, guys, is not the filter. It's not up to those dispatchers to decide whether a call is or isn't worth passing on to the officer. I read that in the comments every once in a while. No, there's too much liability at stake, okay? That's not their job. The one who's supposed to know what they're doing is the officer. Okay, good luck with that. But anyway, so they lie, they put the lie to the officer, it's already stepped up, and then the officer arrives on scene. Now we're going to talk about below the line. And this is what worked for me, and this is why I call it a proper field interview, especially compared to what we're seeing in the videos from all these different officers. They don't have a clue. They don't know how to do a Terry stop. They don't know how to do a proper field interview. My question is, Copper, what do you know? All right, so the first one who gets interviewed by the officer is the reporting party. That's fine. That's the way it should be. So they interview the reporting party, but here's where the mistakes start. The officer is supposed to go into these field interviews as a natural skeptic, in being or having an open mind. They're supposed to start off equally. Okay, it's just they go into this. Remember, the officer hasn't seen anything. They don't know what's going on. There's certainly no probable cause or even reasonable suspicion at that point. So they go and interview the reporting party without a skeptical or open mind. And that's the first mistake they make. It's like they show up and just want to figure out a way to arrest people. So they interview the reporting party. They're supposed to be skeptical and open-minded, but they're not. And now we get into the Dave methodology. I always told them, guys, you're the ones who called and started this whole process. Understand that there's always two sides to every story. And something else I told the reporting party is I work for both sides. I'm not just here to hear your story and work on behalf of you. I have to work on behalf of both parties. And I have to be objective. Okay, so then I would warn them, I'm here and I'm going to listen, But for me to be able to do my job properly, you have to provide 100% accurate information. No embellishment. I stayed away from the word lie. Only the facts that you can attest to, that you heard, that you saw personally. No conjecture, no opinion, 100%. Because if you don't, I would tell them, if you don't, now you're going to get in trouble. So help me out by making sure that you give me the right information. Okay, so there's the warning. They have to give me the proper information. Don't lie, don't embellish, is what I was getting at. And then the next thing you never see the officers do is, once they've gotten that far, they never split these people up. Have you ever seen them split them up? You can't have just this amorphous mass of people who are all talking and they're contradicting each other. And no, that's not what happened. This split them up. Now I'm going to ask you guys, I'm going to challenge you with this question. Once they're split up, who should the officer focus their efforts on? The person who called 911, who actually reported to law enforcement, whose name and personal information and verbatim information has been recorded by 911. Just like the call is recorded when it goes out to the patrol officer. You focus on the caller, the one who kicked this all into place in the first place. So you split them up and go talk to the original person who made that original call. And then it comes down to, you listen, you collect the information, you ask them to go through it a second time to see if they change anything. How often do you ever see these officers do that? And then comes the next, this is the start of the filter. This next step, this is called the filter. If a cop does this, it'll never make it to the activist. It'll never make it to an arrest. You tell them, now you realize that what you've told me, if it goes to a certain level, and that there is probable cause of a crime and there's a formal charge, that you're going to have to testify in court under oath. You're going to have to provide sworn testimony, because I, as the officer, did not witness any of these violations or this alleged violation. So now you're telling them that the onus is 100% on them, and they're going to have to testify under oath. Well, what do you think when I call it a filter? What do you think I mean by that? Well, they know they didn't report a crime. They know they lied. Now all of a sudden you're talking about, well, if this is going to go any further, you're going to have to testify under oath. You're going to see them jump ship. They're going to start backpedaling. They're going to say, well, it wasn't really that big a deal. Could you just go talk to him? This is the fail-safe. By the time you get down to the testimony under oath, you're already starting to set in place whether this goes any further or not. And then when you say, you may have to testify, and because of that, I'm going to need you and everybody here to fill out a written statement to make sure that what you're reporting is captured accurately on a written statement. I would just hit them up with, you're going to have to testify because I didn't see it. And then I say, oh, by the way, because if you testify, if you want to go forward, if there's something worth going forward with, you'll have to testify. I didn't see it, so I need you all to fill out written statements. Now, what's going to happen? Once again, I know it's a rhetorical question, but through this whole process, right up until you start talking about them having to testify and them filling out a written statement, and they know they've already lied and they know that there wasn't anything there to begin with, what do you think's going to happen to this? It blows up, it implodes. By the time an officer gets down to this part, the testimony and the written statement, if there isn't anything that's even close or apparent to being a crime, they should have already said, thank you, there's nothing here, I'm going to go talk to these guys, let them know what's going on, talking about the activists, and I'm out of here. If it hasn't already happened and they react just like we know they will, Now it's done for sure. So let's go ahead. Oh, and the activists don't have to ID until unless the officer is able to articulate reasonable suspicion of a specific crime or probable cause of a crime or crimes. Other than that, they just can't go running to the activists. Watch what they do with, well, they said you trespassed. No, I didn't. Well, you're detained until they go review their surveillance. No. They have to be able to articulate reasonable suspicion or probable cause of a crime or crimes before they detain. It's not detain till we figure something out. God, who trains these officers? So let's just go through with a recap. Reporting party doesn't like what the activist is doing. They call dispatch and they lie. Dispatch, which is not the filter, puts the lie, which they don't know about, to the officer. And the onus, again, is on the officer to actually know their job. Just like everybody else has to know theirs, only most people don't ruin lives and then get away with it. So the officer arrives on scene. They interview the reporting party first. That's procedure. They're supposed to go in being skeptical, making sure to maintain an open mind. They then tell them, like I did, they should tell them, like I did, that there are two sides to every story and that I work for both sides. And that's why the information has to be 100% accurate. You called. I'm here because you called. For me to be able to do my job properly and to make sure I stay within constitutional boundaries, you had better tell me the facts and only the facts. So there was the warning. I would split those reporting parties up. Obviously, if there's more than one, I would split them up. If there's multiple officers, they can each take somebody. But I would focus as responding, or the initial responding officer. I would focus my field interview on the RP who actually called. That's why they're called RPs. Who called law enforcement? What did they report? Tell them, that there may come a time that you may have to testify, which means under oath. And because of that likelihood or possibility, I'm going to need you to fill out a written statement stipulating the facts or whatever that you've already shared with me by putting it down on paper. And that's the fail-safe. You may have to testify, and because of that, I need you to fill out a written statement. And if any hedging, anything, or there's nothing apparent in terms of criminal activity, it's over. You tell them there's nothing here. Next time you call, probably want to make sure that there's an element of a crime involved. Okay, so the activists aren't in any trouble. They don't have their lives ruined because someone like Kate Fisher didn't show up out of Dothan, Alabama, or everybody's favorite, Andrew Camella from Cranston, Rhode Island, and this plethora of other officers who they said this. They said you did this. That means you must have done it. Give me ID. Oh, you're not going to ID, go to jail. There hasn't been a crime. They haven't been able to establish anything because without seeing the actual violation or crime, it either rests completely with the callers, the reporting party, to stipulate to whatever facts there are that would support probable cause, or like I did 90% of the time when somebody would report to me, they wanted nothing to do with testifying. So now it was incumbent upon me to conduct what's called an independent investigation, an investigation that's independent from the information that was shared with me by the original reporting party, be they a confidential informant or anonymous report, it doesn't matter. Then it's on me. I didn't see it. If they're not willing to testify, it's over. If they're willing to testify, then I collect the information and it takes a different route. And most times in my case, they wanted nothing to do with testifying. So now I'm like, okay, I'm going to conduct an independent investigation. But if those people don't confess and you're not willing to testify, we ain't got nothing. Okay? So I don't know. I hope that serves a purpose and it's helpful in terms of the ways to conduct a proper field interview by law enforcement. What's interesting is I was asking myself the other day, why do I have to do this for law enforcement? I mean, I'm actually doing it for you guys. But I'm doing this because law enforcement doesn't know how. I thought I was retired. Rise of the Oath Breakers. Don't leave home without it.